everybody, and welcome to this, which is our penultimate CPD of this academic year. It's hard to believe that we're in June. So with a bit of a fun one on starters, plenaries and games. So all the kind of fun stuff that as language teachers we really enjoy, and hopefully to give some really great tips for non-specialists who've not had any language training and want to incorporate these games and want simple, easy ways to just increase motivation and engagement and enjoyment in your lessons. That's what we're hoping for. And then next month in July is our last CPD of this year, and that one's on transition. So we've got sort of a year 6 expert and a secondary expert coming to talk, and they'll be talking about what's really important to think about with transition and supporting your year 6s as they move to secondary school. So anyway, starters, plenaries and games for language learning. So this is a really fun one. It's a topic that as soon as I started talking about it with the team, everybody had so many ideas, and you know, we had to kind of put a limit on it because at the end there are so many different things that we do. But I've really tried to concentrate on the sorts of things that you can do without an awful lot of preparation. So generally it's quite straightforward for you to be able to integrate these, and if you gather together a collection of some props, you will, you know, be in a position to very quickly put together quality unplanned games as well, which is really helpful. So we're going to look at some things to consider about starters and plenaries in particular, just to make sure that they have value, and look, as I said, some low stakes and some low prep ideas. So, you know, you can tick off some assessment for learning and kind of, you know, monitoring checkpoints with your starters and plenaries. So it's really useful if you kind of take that into account, and then looking into games as well with some low stakes and low prep ideas and just some fun things that you can integrate into the classroom quite easily that will fit into any scheme of work, or if you've got a spare bit of time. Even, as is often the case, particularly at this time of year, language time gets squeezed on the curriculum. Therefore, you know, fitting in a 10-minute language game might be your only language that week. However, as I've always been at pains to point out to the CPD, if you can't follow through with a progressive scheme of work because your school is not letting you do that with the time that you have, any language input is valuable insofar as you're developing skills, you're delivering, you know, collaboration and fun and engagement and enthusiasm and a chance to build cultural appreciation. So no matter how small, don't neglect it. If you've got 15 minutes for languages, don't feel you can't achieve anything. You still can. So we want to have a look at is how we can embed these into our lessons and, you know, just add those little elements of fun in there. So thinking about why we need them. Obviously, starters and plenaries are really big parts of, you know, an expected part of lesson planning these days. And with languages at primary school, it tends to be that it will be, if you're a separate teacher coming in from the class teacher to deliver that, it's an awful lot easier because that starter or that plenary starts and finishes your session. So, you know, from that point of view. And if you're the class teacher having to deliver French, it helps make that break as well. So kind of, you know, as a basic level, I would always have my children stand up, and this goes from primary right through to year 11, where I'd have the children stand up and you'd have a bonjour la classe, bonjour madame, and everyone would sit back down just to get you in the frame of mind. You know, starters, as we know, they set the tone for the lesson, but actually they're fantastic for activating prior knowledge of grammar and vocabulary. So if you're going to introduce something new, then this is your chance to kind of remind them of what that might be. So if you're going to be doing some new nouns, then a starter that looks at masculine and feminine might be really useful. Or if you're going to be looking at adjectives, then a starter that looks at adjective agreements or something like that is going to be really helpful, or identifying adjectives in a sentence, for example. You know, if you're going to introduce a new topic or grammar point, then a starter is a great way to kind of introduce that. So you can use the time to do a little bit of an intro into that. So it can be really helpful. Generally, as I've said, sets the tone for your lesson, but you're getting children using the target language immediately. Thinking on a practical level, if you're a peripatetic teacher and you're moving from room to room, it's very, very difficult to walk in and be able to get go immediately. There's always that lag as you're kind of changing over, finding your stuff, trying to tick things off in a list or whatever. It isn't instant and it isn't seamless. Having a quality starter ready to go means that you can get yourself kind of organized for the lesson. You can monitor the children quite quickly, and then, you know, get the lesson started once you feel that you've given them a chance to instantly have some target language. you know, at the end of the lesson, a plenary obviously is fantastic for reflection. It can be as simple as an opportunity for reflection. So what went well? What should we do? You know, how do you think this went? What have you learned? It could be as simple as an actual reflection, but you know, it's a good chance to refer back to the lesson objectives. Did we do this? Can you now do this? It's great to consolidate learning, and it's great to help them remember language structures. So can you remember what you saw in this lesson? Let's go back through it. So, you know, they're really useful. Taking that into consideration, however, you can still have starters and plenaries that don't relate to the topic of your lesson, because as I always am at pains to point out, we're really wanting children to find a love for language learning. So, you know, your starter could be a song, it could be your plenary, could be a little story that you read. It doesn't always have to be a grammar exercise that sets it up. You know, these are, in an ideal world, in a secondary lesson, that's evidently what would happen. But at primary, engagement and motivation has got to be top of the list. So, you know, trying to mix these up so that there's relevance in what you do, but also fun in what you do, would really help. But what's most useful about starters and plenaries, particularly for languages, is that they can really act as a lesson or a unit checkpoint. And by that, I mean, I know that a checkpoint would be relevant in any subject, but in languages, if you're about to start on a new topic and you're about to start some new grammar, you need to know that they've learned the last bit. And if they're still struggling with certain concepts, there isn't any point rushing on ahead. And I've always kind of pointed out throughout these CPDs that it's sort of the skills, not the drills, that are important. So if you need to keep, you know, spend an extra lesson going over that, don't worry that you haven't addressed the content of your scheme of work, because the actual language structures are more important than adding in an extra set of words. You know, at the end of the day, success would be judged by how well they can manipulate the language and build a quality sentence, not by how many different nouns they can add into that sentence. So, you know, just bear that in mind. You know, don't put the pressure on yourself. If you feel that you do a starter and instantly nobody knows what to do and the children have forgotten, and you know, you can see straight away, well, don't be afraid to kind of pause that march onwards and stop where you are and consolidate. They can be great for quick, as I said, for assessment, for learning checkpoints, from the same thing, from that chance to kind of reevaluate. You know, you may not be in a position to act on them immediately because you might have a lesson planned, and circumstances mean that it isn't very easy to always kind of pivot and do something completely different because you might not have the resources. But it can mean that next lesson, you know, right, I know we need to revisit this. And also retrieval practice. These are fantastic opportunities for retrieval. We had a TeachMeet on assessment and retrieval practice in languages. There are far more implications to retrieval practice in MFL than necessarily in other subjects. So, you know, though it's important everywhere, there's a relevance to it specifically for building language and building on what we're knowing. So, you know, do keep that in mind, that the starters and plenaries they don't always have to be relevant in terms of content, but they need to be relevant in terms of context and actually, you know, helping to move children towards some progress. Essentially, getting them using the target language. That's what we want to do. So in all of these slides, and the heading in the purple boxes, I've got links, so you'll find the link when you're sent the PDF of this. You'll find the link to the research review series. And just a couple of things that are just worth bearing in mind. Now, these bullet points are not related to starters, plenaries and games, but I think that's something to bear in mind. So you're thinking about logical pupil progression in the 3 pillars of language, as we know, phonics, vocabulary and grammar. Well, if you know you've got a lesson that's very heavily focused on one of those, but you've ignored one aspect completely, then your starter and plenary could pick up on one of those. You may find it difficult to embed phonics as a regular occurrence into your lesson, but you could have 5-minute phonic interlude is better than no phonic interlude at all. So think about how you can kind of use the starters to kind of help with that progression as well, thinking about it. You know, if you're focusing very much on certain things, it's a lesson that you know there's no writing at all and everyone's going to be chanting and singing. You might want some quiet time at the start and ends to kind of help those children who might be a bit more anxious with noise as well. So, you know, think about those sorts of things. Teachers' use of the language being taught is planned and tailored to build on their ability and prior knowledge. Obviously, there are times in the classroom when we're caught unawares, when we're slightly unprepared, when we're kind of not quite sure and things haven't quite worked and you might want to change your plans, or you think, oh my gosh, I haven't got the world's greatest starter. But we want to look at some banks of things that you can have so that you can make relevant starters and relevant plenaries that can build on that knowledge. That's the most important thing. And then you're creating opportunities for pupils to practice the target language. And that's fundamentally what you want to look for, is opportunities to practice the language that they're doing. So finding a way to do that, get them speaking, get them doing something. You want them to be able to communicate in an unscripted way. This is their kind of time to do that outside of the lesson structure. So, you know, thinking about those aspects behind it. Similarly, this is really interesting. There are some guiding principles from the review on cognitive science and how we learn. And there's just a couple of interesting kind of points. I've just got the arrows to there, thinking about short-term memory, processing, and how you embed knowledge. So thinking about that, so you can use the starters and the plenary as part of that process, that you're thinking, I really want to embed something, so I'm going to revisit the same thing every week, or my class are really struggling with adjectival agreements, so I'm going to do every single starter this half term is going to be something on that, or, you know, building it around it. Looking at spaced or distributed practice, rehearsal. So basically, you know, over a period of time, you're constantly coming back and practicing something. As we've said, retrieval practice, bringing something from the past into the present and bringing it back to what you're doing. So thinking about those sorts of things. So, you know, just look at how you can use a starter and plenary to your advantage. Don't feel, yes, there is 100% a place for them to be fun activities too. And I think particularly at primary school, where the most important thing is that foster curiosity and a love of learning, that's the most important thing of all. But equally, use this to help move your progress forward at the same time, so that there is relevance in it. Another thing that's really worthwhile to think about, both for starters, plenaries, and also games, is children's self-belief and how they feel about themselves, particularly with languages. We all know the bad rap that languages have. Generally, pupils, you know, and parents, other teachers, you will see it particularly at secondary school when people come to choose GCSEs, a relatively negative perception. Oh no, languages are difficult. I can't do languages. Languages are not for me. So we want to kind of use the opportunities that we can to help pupils feel positive about languages. Therefore, something, and this is great, language learning experiences that they perceive as successful. So a quick kind of activity where they can successfully complete it sets them up with a positive frame of mind for that lesson. This is another one, sounding out words in a foreign language. So perfect, a starter is a perfect opportunity for a reading aloud exercise or for a phonics activity. You know, ensuring that the building blocks are in place so pupils can exercise greater autonomy. So if, as I've said, your lesson is on a grammar point, you can just be recapping that grammar point in your starter, for example. And seeing, you know, other children communicating and doing this is really positive. So, you know, we need pupils to feel successful in what they've done. So something quite low stakes in a starter that pupils can get right is going to give them a positive mindset to start the lesson. Similarly with the game, if they have success in a game, even if it's game of noughts and crosses, the positive vibes that brings to the lesson is immense. So, you know, do think about that, which is why interactive games are brilliant, because you get instant feedback as well, and you can see straight away if you've got them right or wrong. So quiz questions, the same, you know, you can see those kind of things. So just a little bit of theory behind it to kind of think about the importance. But really, the things we want to consider when you're planning a bank, and I would also sort of, you know, have a bank of starters and plenaries realistically, is do you want them to be teacher led or not? Is this you're coming in and teaching for 5-10 minutes to lead the activity, or are you going to hand them over to the children? There's value in both, but you know, that's something to think about. It's worth thinking about the simplicity and clarity of what you're doing, so that they don't need an awful lot of explanation. So that if you've walked in as a peripatetic teacher, or from, you know, you're an HLTA in your school teaching languages, and you've had to move from year 3 to the year 6 classroom, and you've come straight in, you don't want to be faffing around with all sorts of resources and different things. You want something that children are going to know what to do. So a relatively familiar structure. You can see online that, you know, you see this for all subjects, kind of like a template screen that, you know, people have with a lesson objective and those sorts of things. You can have like a fixed, you could just have a PowerPoint, you know, with a fixed bank of starters on them that you rotate through, so the children are familiar with them, or, you know, as long as they know that they're appearing and, you know, you're kind of drilled on this, then it's really going to help. As I said, it's important that they're low stakes, nothing that's going to demotivate anyone because they can't access them. Low prep time for you is important because, you know, time pressure is worse than ever. So that's part of what we're looking at here. As I've said, a familiar format as well as structure, fewer explanations, retrieval practice. Think about if you want to work on words or chunks. So, you know, current thinking is tending more towards chunks of language, which means that you would give children sentences or short blocks of language rather than just individual words. However, if your lesson's been focused on vocab, then there's nothing to stop you just working on vocab. But, you know, think about that aspect too, so that you do mix it up. Do you want to set a time limit? Do you want a timer? Would that be helpful? Does, you know, that sense of urgency? Think as well about cross-topic transfer. So in other words, just because your unit this half term is on pets doesn't mean your starter has to be on pets, because if you're doing pets with adjectives, then quite clearly your starter could be on some other aspect of adjectives. Or, you know, if you're using I have a pet, then what else could you say I have? Let's look at the verb avoir, for example. So, you know, think about cross topics within that. Think about the processing demand, similar to what we said. Think about the content of your lesson. You know, if your lesson is going to have a lot of writing in it, don't give them a writing task for the starter. You know, if it's going to be quite a noisy lesson, then give them a quieter task to start with. You know, think about, you know, those kind of aspects too. Think about covering reading, writing, speaking and listening over a period of time throughout your starters, so they're not always sitting in silence doing a task. And think if your starters would need support, such as a word mat, knowledge organizer, or some sort of sentence building grid. Think if you might need those as well. That can be really helpful. So this is a great blog. Well, in fact, it's not just a blog, it's a massive amount of fantastic blogs. Steve Smith is someone who's really worthwhile reading, and there's a link there in the purple if you click on that when you get the PDF through, a link to his site. And he actually has two great blogs on starters and plenaries. I think they're called Nifty Starters and Nifty Plenaries, and they're really fun. But this is something that he said, and I think this is quite interesting, is that he prefers starters and plenaries to be teacher-led, so you can grab the attention and set the business-like tone. So during some other posts, he suggested paired activities, and these are also good, but depends entirely on the, you know, the behavior management, the relationships and those sorts of things. So, you know, if you know the class well and you know they'll work, then, you know, a pair activity or a group activity or collaborative task to start is absolutely fine. But, you know, think about the nature of the class and whether that's suitable. So, you know, that's really useful. And I'd really recommend that, you know, you go away and have a read of those, because not just in this area, but he has loads of fantastic ideas and thoughts on language teaching. And I always think that blogs are really fantastic ways to develop CPD. You may not have time to always attend a webinar or always watch a video, but, you know, I always call it sort of like that coffee time learning. I absolutely love reading language blogs, you know, and kind of picking up ideas from that. And there are so many fantastic experienced teachers who blog quite prolifically, and they're really, really useful. They have wonderful ideas, and they're also really good at citing research and, you know, sharing and those sorts of things. So I would really recommend having a look at his blog, and kind of, you know, some of the links that he then suggests to other blogs are also worth following through and kind of adding that to your sort of toolkit, or even your languages subject file, you know, a link to that, because there are some great articles with resources that are worth reading, and you can suggest them to other members of your team as well. So before we look at some ideas, at this point, if anyone's got any ideas they want to share in the chat of any great starters or plenaries or anything that you love or works for you, then please do share them, because the best thing about these CPDs has been the great collaboration and the sharing of good practice. It's how we get ideas, it's how we get our best ideas from other teachers. So, you know, if you do have anything great, oh fantastic, code breakers, that's a really fun one. What a lovely idea. If anyone's got anything else like that, then please do share in the chat. I absolutely love seeing your ideas, because, you know, often they're, you know, super practical and instant things that you can make without, you know, having to create an awful lot of work for yourself. So please continue to share those in the chat, and I'll kind of pick up on them as they're appearing. But some low stakes and low prep ideas really for starters and plenaries. Reading aloud is a simple one. Now, for the new, I know it's a long way away and we're talking about primary languages, the new GCSE languages incorporates reading aloud as part of it. Therefore, Key Stage 4 teaching, filtering down to Key Stage 3 teaching, is going to start incorporating reading aloud. So it makes sense that children get used to reading aloud at primary school because they're probably going to be asked to do it in year 7. So, you know, you can have some simple sentences. Oh, facts and fictions. I like that idea. That's a great idea. Thank you, Corinne. So you can have some simple sentences based on your topic, and children have to practice reading them, really focus on their pronunciation. There may be a specific phonics sound that you've been working on that you can focus on. You know, it's a great opportunity to do that as a starter. So say your topic is on clothes and colours, there's a little paragraph to read, some sentences to read, and they have to work together and read those out loud, which can be absolutely brilliant. I've mentioned this before in a speaking activity, Pass the Parcel, which is always one of my absolute go-tos. So you need to have some music on standby, preferably French or Spanish song, and you need something as your parcel. I usually have a hat, or if I've been desperate, I have been known to pass a board pen around if I've had nothing with me, but anything at all. You play the music, it passes around, and whoever lands on it, if they've got a hat, put the hat on, and or, you know, they just hold whatever it is, and they either have to say something or do something according to what you've said. But it's a fun way to kind of get things moving. Oh, some great ideas here. We're going to talk about bingo in a while, vocab bingo and traffic lights. I haven't actually got traffic lights on my list today, but traffic light games are really great. Thank you. Please keep sharing. I love seeing them, and they're really helpful to add to them. But I love Pass the Parcel because it was so simple, especially if they're hearing French and Spanish in the song. And it's quite a good one because they're kind of active and doing something, and they've got to listen out. And it could be, you know, even if it's as simple as saying, Me llamo Beth, and it lands on you, say your name. Simple. A ball, always good to have a ball in the classroom, you know, for emergencies, throw a ball around. I used to teach in a boys' school, and the ball sometimes it kind of got a bit of violence. So I probably didn't always rely on this, but it is really, really useful to have a quick ball, throw it around the room. They have to pass it to each other. And you can also use it to play like a hot potato thing. If the ball lands on you, you've got to get rid of it. Who are you going to give it to? And then you answer the question. That is a wonderful one. Imagine that you have to explain something to aliens. Now that is a brilliant one, particularly, Corinne, do you use that if you've learned like a new grammar point or something like that? Yeah, a softball. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. So yes, no cricket balls in the classroom. Oh, word searches for a starter activity. That's a really good idea, particularly for embedding vocabulary. Great. And you can get them to read aloud the words as well. Saying what you see. So, you know, just some random sporting pictures, but these could be great because you could link these to a topic. So, you know, if you're learning about pets, well, then there's some pictures and you can teach them the words for veo, I see, je vois, and they have to list some things. It could be as simple as saying, I see the colours, and they just list the colours that they see. Or if it's clothes, they just list the clothes that they see. Or for more able learners, you could give them a dictionary and they have to look up some extra words of what they see. So trying to, you know, list things that they're seeing. Hangman, yeah, we're going to mention that later, perpetual favourite. Love that. Imagining a different point of view. These are great. Dice are some great things to have as props. Love a dice roll. You can make your own grid up like that and just fill it with something, and children can work with a pair, or you can roll a dice and it lands on something and they have to make a sentence. Just a good way to put a sentence together. So you could take a standard sort of grid that you have and then just, you know, add in a dice here. So for example, for this one, very simple, the one we've got at the bottom, the example, you roll a 4, you'd have to say, oh, je vais au Portugal en bateau avec mon frère. And they're having to say something aloud. So, you know, and then you could challenge children to add extra things in if they want to as well. Spending the words is great. So you can do this in multiple ways. You can have some words on the board. You can quickly jot them down. So say you're learning a about brothers and sisters, you could just put the word for brother, the word for sister, the word for family, you know, things like that on the board. And children have to use as many of those words as they can in the sentence. And, you know, trying to spend the, you know, the words of a value. You can attach values to each of the money, and they've got to try and use them and tick them off. You can do it in a different way as well, but it's almost like a word bingo that they have to tick off the words that are there and use them. But, you know, it's, you can have like a cost value. So you can have a list of simple words, like, you know, I, you, whatever, and then you could have some conjunctions. You could have and, but, and they've got a higher value, and at the end then you can see how much they've spent. That's one way of doing it. You don't even need to have the value. You could just have it that the words are there and they have to try and do it. Oh, was it Corinne who mentioned about Codebreaker? If you wouldn't mind just sharing, if you could, in the chat about how you play it, that would be brilliant. Fantastic. Simon says we're going to talk about the wonderful Simon later as well. And here are some other quick ideas that work really well for plenaries. Completing the sentences. So start or finish. You could just have a sentence, so it could be j'ai deux, so I have two, and they have to finish it off. Or, you know, it could have deux chiens, and they have to start it with the j'ai. So some simple sentences to complete. Spotting the mistake, especially if you know, oh no, I've made some mistakes, what have you got here? They have to try and fix them. Quick translation. Now, translation is something that's really become embedded at secondary school. So at a very simple level, getting translation as something they're quite used to at primary school is really good. So really simple translations. It can be translation matching, or it can be actual translation into English or into French or Spanish. Quick dictation. This is something that's also coming into GCSE languages, which means it will come into Key Stage 3 languages, which will filter down into Key Stage 2 languages. So little dictations, simple sentences. Number 1, je m'appelle Pierre. Number 2, j'ai trois chats. You know, again, simple sentences, but getting them to do it, and then you could make them translate it. What am I thinking? So this was always, you know, a very simple game. It kind of, you know, it can be about absolutely anything. So say you've just learned some new vocabulary. I'm thinking about an animal. Which one is it? And the children have to guess the animal. Obviously, you can be quite sneaky, and if they guess it on the first one, you can say no and change it until they've named enough of them. Time talking can be a great starter. I'm going to set the timer. You've got 60 seconds, and you have to talk continuously about, or it could just be talking continuously, or you know, you're not allowed to use English for this amount of time. Always quite good. Change 1, 2, 3, however many things. So you could give them a sentence or a little paragraph, and they have to change something. So if it says I have a cat, they have to change one thing. I have a dog. Change another thing. I have 2 dogs. Change something else. He has 2 dogs, you know, or he has 2 white dogs. You know, how can they keep adding that sentence? Gap fills are great, but do obviously require some preparation. But if you've got some quick sentences, it's very easy to just cover something up, you know, and block those out. Sentence building grids are wonderful, particularly as they tend to be used now like a knowledge organizer or a word map, that children can have those and they can start building some sentences to work. An odd one out, so you just write a pile of nouns on the board and one of them is a verb, and which one is it, the odd one out? Or it could be some sentences, because we're talking about, do you want word level or chunking? So you've got some sentences, and it could be, you know, I have 2 brothers, I have 3 sisters, my car is blue. Which is the odd one out. Look-up challenge. This can be great if you're trying to embed dictionary skills, or, you know, children have access to something online, some sort of word reference tool, and they can look up a list of vocabulary. That can be useful, particularly if it's new words for the lesson. Finding word classes is a great one. So if your lesson is going to be talking about some new nouns, then get them in a text to find the nouns or find the adjectives, etc. You've got 60 seconds to write down everything that you can think of about, or every word that you know about pets, every word that you know about school, and they have to try and jot it down. They can work in teams or with pairs on a mini whiteboard here. And anagrams, obviously, or jumbled sentences to try to mix up. And these are the sorts of things that if you have some sentence cards, you could get them to kind of build their own sentences from the jumblings as well, which are things that you can kind of put together with a few minutes before the lesson starts, just writing them yourself on a whiteboard. So some other ideas for great starters or plenaries. Think about some things about yourself in French. You could do this about yourself. As a teacher, you could put these on the board and children then have to guess the questions, or they can do this in pairs. Quite a nice one. They can take it in turns to describe someone. You can give them some prompt words. It's always really helpful. You can vary the prompts that are there, but you know, some pictures, and they have to describe them. This works as well with like little monsters. So you know, he has 3 eyes, he has 4 arms, etc. That can be really nice. And they have to guess who it is. Entrance and exit tickets. So embedding this into your routine. So finding a way that it could just be that your starter is answering the register by saying something about yourself, or as you come into the classroom, you have to say something to come in, as you know, or you find a midpoint in the lesson. It's like, right, to move on to the next activity, you know, an easy way to do it, to find out, make sure that everybody speaks, is everybody stands up. Everybody needs to tell me their age in Spanish. So once they've said tengo 8 años, great, you sit down, and they can say it and sit down. And, you know, they can say it really quickly and then quickly sit down until everybody's done it. And they're so desperate to sit down, the children are all trying to blurt out the language, which can be a really good one. Something to leave the classroom. So you can't leave the classroom until you tell me this. So, you know, they get used to that. Hot potato, I mentioned this with the bull, but it's a similar kind of thing. Even better if you've got a potato, because nobody wants to hold a potato, do they? So that's quite a good one. But you can have an actual potato, and it's like, oh, I've got it. What, you know, whoever's got the potato has got to say 3 words that they've learnt today, and they've learnt them out. They check, you know, they pass it on to the next person, and you know, and it goes. Or when it arrives, you've got 30 seconds to do. You can, you know, come up with any sorts of things, but anything that involves a little bit of, you know, it's got something physical, a kind of resource with it, a bit of humor, and it kind of engages pupils, particularly if it's very, very low stakes and it doesn't matter if they get it wrong. You know, it's remember 3 words at all, anything that you can remember. Most children, even your lower retainers, will remember bonjour or au revoir and things, so that, you know, at least if they say that, they've still said something. Getting active is brilliant for a starter or a plenary, particularly a starter if you've had a long morning of geography and history and science, and then you've got languages after lunch and you're trying to kind of pep everybody up. A song is fantastic, getting everybody moving. I've recently invested in a standing desk. I'm standing and I'm finding I'm much more active in the day, and it really helps my concentration even as an adult. But we've got some great active languages videos which have got singing and dancing with some songs. They introduce some language and then they have some singing and dancing. We've got a blog and some CPD on that to help you do a little bit more, but that can be a fun thing. But of course you can go onto YouTube and find a French or Spanish song or video and sing along with it. That's a great way to start a lesson. As I've said, your plenary doesn't have to be, a starter or plenary doesn't always have to be exactly on the topic. The important thing is that you're getting the children using the language. This is an example of one of our videos. So, you know, they're targeted for younger learners, but they're great fun, and they've got some actions that you can go along with. Stories are also wonderful as well. We've got a growing collection of ebooks. They've all got audio, so you don't need to worry if you're a non-specialist about reading them aloud, or even narrated in English with the French or Spanish. So you can, you know, start off the lesson with a story. You know, our collection of those are growing, so, you know, we're adding to them all the time. But that's kind of like the inside. And these are great for cross-curricular links too, because it was Hedgehog Awareness Week not so long ago, and World Penguin Day and various things. And, you know, you could have one of those little stories on that, which makes it really nice. Songs as well are always great fun and can be great. Obviously, you know, we've got some, but you will find endless songs online that you can access really quickly, and they can be really fun to sing along with. Thinking then about language games. Now, our starters and plenaries can be games, but they are more likely to be a bit more traditional in terms of the fact that they're going to be more learning focused, although they can, it's fun to sort of intersperse them and have games, but it's really worthwhile embedding as many games as you can into your lessons, mainly because of the engagement and motivation that brings in. You know, they're great for collaborative working. They tend to be low stakes use of the language. Children are more likely to use the language in a fun environment. They can be great for anxious learners. You do need to bear in mind the noise levels though, and how that might impact. Particularly, I've often had people knock on my door because I've been really noisy and disturbing the class next door. But you know, it's that might happen. That's a warning with, you know, kind of really noisy games, or some people who really struggle with noise levels. Bear in mind, but you know, by and large, they're great for involving people. Games are brilliant, particularly interactive games, because you get instant feedback, and it goes back to that self-efficacy and motivation, because you can see if you've done well or not. Great for retrieval practice, great for assessment for learning, great for little checkpoints that you can kind of pop in and kind of, you know, monitor, particularly if people are working in groups, you can monitor what they're doing. Great for getting them speaking in the target language. Fantastic for consolidating anything that's been learnt. I agree with you, Corinne. Sounds great. Cultural awareness and understanding. So, you know, it's your chance to bring in areas. You may be struggling with story strongs and rhymes. You may be struggling with cultural capital. Well, your starters, plenaries and games are opportunities possibly to bring those in. Chance for a different context. If they've spent ages doing listenings and bits and pieces on their writing, it's nice to have a bit of fun too. It's a chance to practice everything, and generally a bit of a brain break. You know, it is nice. Children do need that. You know, it's very easy, particularly at primary level, to set our expectations too high about what substantial progress in one language really means. And, you know, for me, I think the most important things is that children will start year 7 excited about language learning. So if you incorporate games at primary school and they see languages as fun and positive, yes, learning isn't always fun at secondary school. Learning isn't always fun at primary school. There has to be elements of sitting and participating, etc. But positive reinforcement of language learning, particularly for a subject like ours, where there are so many negative perceptions, really, really helps. So, you know, games are great because you're giving children the chance to basically tick off various aspects of the national curriculum throughout games. So they're ways to help you make kind of progress targets too, because they're going to join in and respond. You can look at patterns of language. They're going to have conversations, possibly ask and answer questions, give opinions, respond to other people. They can ask for help while they're doing it. We'd hope they're going to speak in sentences. It gives you a chance to walk around and monitor their pronunciation, you know, look at ideas, absolutely. Turn taking, Karina's just mentioned, and they can describe things. So it gives you a chance to sort of check off areas of the national curriculum, but also develop independence, develop collaboration, develop team working skills and turn taking skills, all of which are really useful. We've got, there's a link in the purple box to these. We've got 2 CPD packs on activities and games with links to some great ideas for you. But I'm going to again look at some kind of low stakes and low prep ideas. But you can use games and activities, can be as a starter or a plenary. They're great to introduce a new topic, or a great way to practice the vocab for a topic, or even to consolidate it. It's fantastic to build recall games into your routines. So in the register, when you're taking the register, everybody has to stand up, say something, sit back down. Simple little recall games like that. So as I said, a start, there's like the exit and entry ticket. Like you say, oh, before we do this, if you want a new pen, you've got to stand up and, you know, you've got to say pencil, pencil, pencil 3 times. Or, you know, building in little game elements like that can be really helpful. Great for power and group work, and they can be perfect to end your lesson as well. Although if you're then, you know, leaving them in the middle of the day and you've hyped them up, you just, you know, need to bear that with in mind. But it's also really important that the children are supported in the games so that they can actually access them and that they're actually using them in the target language. So if you give them, you know, a snakes and ladders game in French and they're just playing it in English, arguably that's not really that helpful. You want to make sure that they are using the target language. So that might be having key phrases on the wall, walking around, encouraging them as much as possible, giving them as much support as they need. So, you know, do they need a word mat? Do they need a knowledge organizer? Do they need some sort of sentence pack, for example? Rewarding success. I don't mean rewarding who's won the game, but rewarding success throughout that game, or who's, you know, praise goes an awful long way, even in games, you know, remember that. Games are a great opportunity to repeat key language. Children can repeat things over and over without actually realizing that they're learning really when they're playing a game. As Corinne said, yes, it could well be a dictionary instead of a word map potentially. Make sure the games are relevant. As I said, they can be outside of the content context, but they're useful to be, within the sphere. But most importantly, there need to be opportunities to use the target language, whether that's reading it, listening to it, writing it, or speaking it. Games should be somehow using the target language. That's really important. So again, we looked at starters and plenaries. Please keep sharing in the chat if you've got some favourite games. I'm going to go on with some ideas now, but if you've got some ideas for games, do share them in the chat. They're great for us to see. So some low stakes and low prep ideas. Easiest of all is always noughts and crosses. Very simply. Now, if you're more organised, you can fill the noughts and crosses grids with pictures of the vocabulary. Or you could just fill it with English words and they have to translate the word into English or make a sentence with that word. You could put a word inside French inside it and they have to make a sentence with that word, or they have to translate it into English. Or you can number the noughts and crosses grid. They pick the number and then they have to do a task in order to get that space. Divide the class into two and they're playing noughts and crosses. It's the simplest way, to have a quick team game without any preparation at all. It's really simple and it's always really popular. Another game that is incredibly popular without any preparation really is Splat. This is always a favorite because children can move around and you can do this in different ways. You could put pictures on the interactive whiteboard. You call two children to the front. They stand with their hands behind the back. You call out a word. The first one to splat the correct image wins the point. You could even get another child to actually be the teacher and call out the words. Yes, Flora's lava is a good one. You can also do this in a slightly more noisy way, in that you split the class into two and you number everybody. And say you've got all the different colours on the board and you say red, numéro 5, and the two people who are the number 5s from both teams, they have to run to the front of the class and splat it, and the first one of that splat. You just need to keep a record of who's doing that. That's obviously a lot noisier, but this way you can control it a little bit more, which is usually thanked for that by other teachers, because I used to love the noisy one really, but that was my favourite. But it did sort of cause great fun and entertainment, but you need to pick the time that you do that, whereas a little game of controlled splat is much easier. You can also do it if technology fails you can write the words on the board on a whiteboard and they've got a board rubber and they just have to rub them out as well. That really helps. You can also do it as a sort of reverse version of that, there's a pile of flashcards and they have to pick up the flashcard as well. Lots of different ways. You could play it outside with flashcards on the floor and they have to jump on a flashcard, for example, or you could have hoops and they have to jump in the different colours. Different ways of playing that game. There are various versions of that, but whichever one, it is always without fail the most popular language game of all. Simon Says was mentioned earlier. This is great. Traditionally, people probably say Jacadi and Simon Dice for Spanish. Works well for any vocabulary that's got actions, works really well for parts of the body or for pencil case items. Lift up, if you say a pencil, Simon says a pencil, and then you have to hold your pencil up. That's great if they've got those in front of them. Yes, for gym as well, for sports stuff, really good. Fizz Buzz, which is this one messes with my head, so I was never very good at this, but you can play. If you've done numbers, you can play a counting game. Children take it in turns to say the numbers, but if they reach a number with a 3, they say fizz. If it's divisible by 3, they say buzz. But you could switch the rules and make it something else. It could be if it's a masculine noun or a feminine noun, etc. And if they forget, they say buzz. But it tends to be quite fun, and this could be something they can play in little groups. That was not a game I played very often. I know that one of my colleagues, she uses this one a lot. My brain didn't work in that way. I found that really difficult to manage. 4 in a row is great. Now we've got examples of ways to play 4 in a row with some different formats, but you can do this on the board in the same way as noughts and crosses, that you quickly draw up a grid and children have to build 4 in a row. You can do it in various ways. I used to like actually building it like a proper Connect 4 game, that I would have verbs across the bottom and then je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous up the side, and they actually had to go for the bottom first and build it up. as in you would if you were dropping in the counters. However, you can just play it the same as noughts and crosses effectively, but they have to get 4 in a row, which just adds a little bit of complexity to it. So you can, use pre-existing ones, or you can, just very quickly draw those on the board yourself. Penalty shootout's quite a fun one. Great. Split the class into 2. Each team takes it in turns to ask a question, like, how do you say I've got a cat? If the other team says it correctly, they've scored. If they don't, they've missed. And you just play it like penalties. The winners of the team with the best score out of 5. You can go to sudden death until somebody gets it wrong as well. So that can be really fun. Anything with an element of competition like that is always great. Reading my mind, we mentioned about this. Tell the children that you're thinking of a particular word, or it could be a sentence. Write it on a piece of paper or a mini whiteboard. Then encourage them to read the mind and guess what they've done. You can play this as a sort of beat the teacher, that they've got 5 guesses. If they haven't guessed it in 5 guesses, you win the point. Or they could play it against each other. Last child standing, be quite fun. Any vocab, but it works really well with numbers and the alphabet. Everybody stands up. Each child has to say, a letter of the alphabet. If they don't know it, or they sit down, the winner is the last one standing. Quite good fun. Bingo is brilliant. Again, we've got loads of bingo games, but bingo is fantastic. You can very simply say to children, write down 5 words, write down 5 fruits in your book from this list. If you've been learning 10 different fruits, get them to write down 5 of them, and you call out the list and play bingo like that. It's a game that requires 0 preparation. It's fun to play it with proper boards and counters and those sorts of things, but it's a game you can make yourself instantly without anything at all. Children can just have a mini whiteboard, and they just write on the mini whiteboard, write down 5 colours, and then you've learnt the 11 colours, you list them, and you call them out, and they just cross them off. Really simple. Bingo, you can do that as well by extending it, that they write an individual word down, but you actually use the word in a sentence, so they are hearing it at sentence level as well, is really helpful. Repeat after me. So you can put pictures on the board if you're learning some new vocab. Challenge the class to repeat after you as you point to each picture, but they can only say the word if it matches the picture. This works as well with actions, if Simon says. If it doesn't, they have to stay quiet. So you get them to repeat something. If it's correct, they repeat after you. If you're wrong, they say nothing. Every time they do it correctly, the class wins a point. If they do it incorrectly, the teacher gets the point. Anything beat the teacher is usually quite good fun. 1 pen, 1 dice. This is a really popular one. If you just search for this on the internet, you will find many explanations how to play this. It went sort of almost viral on Twitter not so long ago, and Steve Smith and his blog, who I mentioned earlier, has actually got a blog post entirely on this game, which you can read and have a look at. But the premise is, children have a task, any task at all. It could be a little writing task that they've just got to write 5 sentences about themselves, or 3 sentences about themselves. It could be anything at all. It could be a translation. It could even be, in theory, a sort of reading task. It could be anything at all. But there's a task each, 2 pieces of paper, 1 pen or a pencil, and a dice. One person starts writing and doing their work. The other person starts rolling the dice, and they just roll and roll and roll and roll until they actually get a 6. Once they get a 6, they take the pen and they start writing, and then the other partner swaps and starts rolling. The winner is the person who finishes whatever their task is first. This one is a real fun one. Oh gosh, yes, I can see 2 saying how little time there is. I know from, particularly in Key Stage 4, there's so much pressure to cover the secondary curriculum that game playing becomes, really difficult. But actually, if your starter has a little kind of game potentially within it, it's a way to just, make things a little bit more fun, or just injecting a fun element into things can really help, just gamifying even simple things. Guess the word, because we're not allowed to call it hangman. But you know what I mean. It's a game of hangman. It was mentioned earlier. Really, really popular, super easy, requires no planning at all, and can be at sentence level, chunked into sentences. A detective game, various ways you can play this, but you can have a child to leave the room and they're the detective. So you choose someone else who's the culprit, the criminal. The child, the detective, comes back in and closes their eyes, faces the wall, doesn't look. Child two says a word or a sentence from something that you've been learning, and then the child who's come in has to guess who it is. Now, obviously, there's not an enormous amount of language input in this one, but as I keep saying, you want children to have fun, and if they're shouting out, and speaking in the foreign language, then that's a win in my book. So they can be really fun. Four corners. Now this one works really well. It doesn't even have to be four corners. It can be all the walls and all the corners. But say you've been learning different items of vocab, or say you've been learning about the seasons. You could have a different season in each corner of the room. Works in a hall, works outdoors. Children go to the corner, and then you close your eyes, and I'm going to say, right, I'm going to pick, and then you pick one of the words. Everyone in that one is out until eventually somebody's left. But you can, of course, put more pictures up, and they have to go to them until eventually some people are out. Works quite well on the floor with jumping on cards as well, or you could lay some hoops and just put your flashcards down on the floor. That works really well. Counting to 21. This works with the alphabet or months of the year, anything sequential. So anyone can shout out a number at any time. So you've got all the children sitting there. They can sit with their heads down, so it can be quite a quiet activity. And someone says, somebody else will shout out deux. Somebody else might shout out trois. And then two people shout out quatre at the same time, back to the beginning. You've got to manage to get through. So if they're not looking at each other, you've got to get all the way through without two people saying something at the same time. Great for practicing the numbers. The old, I went to market, or I've heard it called granny's basket, or various things, all sorts of things, but saying, I went to the supermarket and I bought. Now that can be quite a long sentence. So you could just have very simply, I have, in which case children just add a noun. I have an apple, I have, or I eat, or I like. You could just, from a simpler point of view, and then just adding on a noun, because otherwise, je suis allé au supermarché et j'ai acheté is suddenly quite a massive sentence. Whereas if you just start with I have, that makes it a little bit easier. Flashcards, a massive stock of flashcards. I think these days with interactive whiteboards, many of us fall out of the habit of having flashcards. When I was a new teacher, I had folders full of flashcards for every possible topic, whereas then eventually it was on the interactive whiteboard and you would just put your pictures through, so you didn't need to have the flashcards, but you can use them for so many different things. Just holding them up, getting children to repeat, translate, matching them. Give cards out, get children to stand up when they hear the word that they've got. They can work in pairs. One person can translate it, for example. As I've just said, they've got to go around and find it, find the word, go and find the card and bring it. You can play splat with flashcards. You can put them in order, all sorts of different things. The same as with matching cards, really. Simple matching games, having a bank of these is really useful. These work nicely for kind of time filler tasks too, which are really nice, or for small group work. Simple matching cards, snap, memory, or a pairs game is always good. Find your partner. If you have loop cards, you can play dominoes with those as well, which are really nice. But we've got loads of different card games that are great for ideas to kind of put together for those as well. They're really lovely to print off and great to laminate. We've also got a great collection of board games. Now I particularly like board games once they're made. They're wonderful, but they require quite a lot of effort in the first place. However, once you've got them, if you laminate them, you've got them for years, and you can bring them out and play them, and they're really good fun. Particularly some of these ones like the French greetings, snakes and ladders. You can use those over and over again because they haven't got too many component parts. They look lovely, and you can also use those as great checkpoints and kind of go all the way around the room while children are playing with them as well. They're really motivating. Interactive games, we've got a massive collection of these. There's information on how, if you've got a Twinkl membership, you can use our learner logins, so all children in your classroom can actually open these up. But they're great because they have, as we've said before, instant feedback, and that instant feedback is really important for self-efficacy and motivation. So that's really important. Those are really fun. Some useful props that are worth always having. A ball, always brilliant. Little bean bags, sort of hacky sack things are great as well. Not great big bean bag, but little ones, because you can pile if you've got bean bags of different colours. You know, all the children have a bean bag. You've got a bucket. Everyone chuck a bean bag in. You've got to say something, put it in the bucket, for example. A fly swatter can be fun because you can play splat, sorry, with the fly swatter, which can be quite fun as well. Dice, really useful, particularly if you can get big ones, even better because they're less likely to go missing. A timer, you can usually just find one on your online on your computer, but you know, a quick simple old-fashioned timer or alarm clock can be really helpful, or just on your phone, frankly. Pile of flashcards, you know, yes, in some ways introducing vocab with flashcards is old school, but they're still some of the best props for language learning. Word mats and knowledge organisers are so helpful. Sentence starter cards as well, or any sort of sentence building grids are great to help children. You know, if you've got a bank of these for different topics, they're great for extra support so you can quickly adapt as you're going along. Bilingual dictionaries. Now, these are expensive and you might not have enough for everybody, but as long as you've got enough for a group, so, you know, maybe 10 for a class would be okay because children could work in groups together. Many whiteboards tend to be fairly standard, but a puppet or a cuddly toy is great. You know, can come out and talk to people, or you can, you know, pass the parcel. A hat is marvelous. If children come up the front, they've got to wear the hat, they've got to do something, or you know, that kind of thing. And songs, having some songs that you can find quickly on standby on YouTube. Bookmark a couple of French and Spanish songs. You can use them for pass the parcel, you can use them for some active learning. Have a little dance around and dance to the song. You know, it can be really great fun. If you've got anything else that you'd like to share, please do pop them in the chat. We absolutely love your ideas, they're fantastic. And just to remind you, we've obviously got a massive range of topic-based activities that are great for starters and plenaries and for games on all of these different areas for French and Spanish and German. You know, things like word searches, things like different loop cards, matching cards, flashcards, etc. You will find them all here, as well as I said, having words, you know, loads of different posters and things that you can use as well. Our CPD range is obviously supporting you as much as we can. Our taster pack does link you to some free videos and some free packs that will hopefully help you with your pedagogy. And if you've got any other comments or questions or feedback, please do pop them in the chat. I will stay on now if you've got any other questions, but I'm conscious of finishing at 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for being with me this afternoon. I really hope that, you know, I know it can be really difficult finding time, particularly at secondary school, for games, but, you know, incorporating some way you can, particularly if they've got, you know, an angle such as a purpose, such as assessment for learning or retrieval practice, or as a kind of checkpoint marker, it does help you justify why you're incorporating them, and it does make them, you know, that little bit more valuable then and more relevant. But thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We hope to see you for our final TeachMeet of this academic year, which is supporting transition for language learners in July. But that's it from me. As I've said, I will hang around if you've got any questions. Please do fill in your feedback form because you will get a free mug posted to you. They're very nice. They do keep your coffee warm for quite a while, actually, Louise, don't they? I'd say they're pretty good. So I would definitely recommend filling those ones in. But thank you so much for joining us, and please stick around if you've got any questions to ask. Thank you.